Wake up to a country fried classic. Golden fried, center-cut pork chop on a handmade buttermilk biscuit. Get 2 for just $5.55. The pork chop biscuit. Jack's, all about the South.
We certainly hope that as you watch this morning, you are feeling great and confident and having a wonderful day. But we also know, Charles Miller and I do, that an awful lot of people watching might be struggling with anxiety, depression. Perhaps you know and love someone who is. So Charles is back with Scenic City Neurotherapy to kind of give us a one-on-one, not so much on how you deal with it, but what's causing it, because it's not always just circumstantial. Your brain actually shifts, right?
Well, yeah,
or changes.
Yeah, there's actual, mappable, measurable breakdown in pathways between your brain cells that occurs secondary to emotional stress. Emotional stress causes a physiologic response that branches into physical change in how the brain talks to itself and to the body.
Okay.
And so I think that's something that is good to understand, as people all the time look at what we do and they're just like, well, that's great, but maybe I don't need this.
Okay, let's kind of break it down, because you deal with this all the time. So let's take the example of anxiety.
Yeah.
Because an awful lot of people deal with that. A lot of younger people are feeling very riddled, they will tell you, with anxiety. So if you are feeling anxious about, okay, you've got a young driver at home driving your car, and you then you limit how much you drive.
Yeah.
Does that anxiety then grow, and now it grows into a different type of anxiety?
Yeah, well, we start to develop anxiety about feeling anxiety later. That's one of our big frustrations in life, is that we think about something and then we're anxious right now about something that's happening later today. And so right now is the moment is being lost because of something that hasn't even occurred yet.
Okay.
And so what we find is that if the more we practice things, the better we get at them. So take driving, for example. When we first start driving, we're very aware, we're very frightened of those 2 lines on the road, and every time they get close to us, we get a little more anxious. But the more we do it, the better we get at it. And then all of a sudden, we stop having to think about those lines.
Okay.
We start adapting into our hardwiring of our brain, and it becomes muscle memory. Driving becomes something that is very simple and something that takes very little brain, actual conscious brain to process. So,
you go back 30 or 40 years, and people who were old enough to have lived then probably heard a lot of things about, you are what you think, or form good habits, these types of kind of pull your pants up lessons that we kind of grew up with. But now I think we are more in tune, it feels like, with what we feel in that moment.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I feel like we put a lot of pressure on our young people these days to push through, which there has to be a time to do that. But there's also a time to stop and pay attention. It's like they are more mentally aware of their struggles, and plus their struggles are unique. I mean, growing up, in the 90s when I was a teenager versus, the teenagers now, there's a whole different level of stress and noise in their life that I didn't have. And
but the brain hasn't totally changed.
No, the brain is the same. My brain was the same, would have been the same brain in this time. It's just the amount of stimulus. Think of it like that. Say all stress causes the brain to break down. When our brain rests, our brain rebuilds. Just like our bodies, if we exercise a muscle, you're lifting the weight, but you're not building the muscle while you're exercising. You're tearing it apart. You're breaking it down. And then when you rest, your muscle rebuilds. Our brains are very similar.
But our brains are created to be, I'll use the word regenerative. Is that a fair word to say? So that old approaches have been, take this pill, try this treatment, and you'll feel better, because it kind of masks the symptom.
Well, the symptom management versus the disease treatment. It's like we don't understand what the underlying issue was, and that was just because brain health has been slow to evolve, like how we understand how the brain works. We understand, we understood the structures, but how the brain speaks to itself and to the body, the way it actually communicates, has been a mystery up until about, say, 20 years ago.
Okay.
So
we have these synapses in our brains. Is that one of the vocabulary words?
Yeah, it is. That absolutely is. Very good. We have these pathways, these dendritic pathways that electrical synapses travel on and send signals, and we have billions of them firing all the time. that keep us functional, that keep us alive, that keep us moving in the direction we want to go. We consciously make decisions, but we're not actually making ourselves walk and talk. We are, we make a decision of what we want to say and how we want to say it, but the ands and does and buts, the sentence structures itself and comes out of our mouth. Kind of the same thing with walking. We think about where we want to go and how we want to move, but we don't have to think about every major and minor muscle as it flexes and releases as we move. We just get up and go.
So back to our car analogy earlier. If you have a young teenage driver and he or she is nervous on a windy, curvy road, that might be one thing to deal with and kind of get in front of. If you have a teen driver who's been in a car accident and is really shaken by that, that might have taken the brain to a whole nother level of anxiety.
Yes.
Is that right?
And every time they re-enter that state, that anxiety is higher. And our natural instinct is, well, let's just not do that. If it hurts, don't. If it hurts when we do that, don't do that. That's not a really good way to address problems. We need to figure out why it hurts, and we need to figure out, and then we need to continue to go through that process as long as it's a healthy process. In this specific analogy, we need to keep driving.
Okay, so but there still might be something in this particular person that is preventing them. They hear you saying get behind the wheel, but they can't.
Yeah.
So if you treat it symptomatically only, it's still not helping the brain to heal.
Right.
Is that right?
Well, and limiting the brain's ability to process the emotion that should be felt. So if we blunt the emotion, then the patient stops progressing. They're held stable in a place they don't want to stay.
Okay.
And so think of it like this: if, say, this, the idea of going to do any task causes me anxiety or stress, and so I take a pill, I no longer feel stressed. Did the stress go away? No, we just turned off your ability to perceive it.
Right. So is that why anxiety and depression can often go hand in hand, because you have the anxiety about a habit or a behavior, and then if you remove, or you feel bad about yourself now because you can't complete the task?
There's a little bit of that, but also to think of anxiety as overstimulation of the brain cells, and depression as slow communicating areas of the brain. And if you think of it that way, you have this area that's moving slow, so this area over here has to overcompensate. And so this one is, you feel depression because this area is not able to process effectively. So this area over here is all stimulus that it's trying to take in all the time is excessive.
So I was at your offices not too long ago, and one of the things that we really talked about frequently was, you've got to get rid of the stigma, and to let people realize that it's not their fault. So to hear you talk about it, it's no different than if you break your arm, you need to get a cast.
Well, yeah, and that's where we come into play of things, is that there are some things that cause enough injury to where we can't just give it time and let it heal, or we're either don't have the opportunity to stop life and really put the effort into taking care of ourselves.
Okay.
And so that's where we see these, long-term mood disorders set up, is that prolonged periods of heightened stress, traumatic events, they cause enough breakdown in the brain secondary to stress to where all of a sudden now we have this injury.
Right.
That if we don't create an environment for this to heal and then give it time to heal and do what we need to do to keep it healing, then the injury just stays and worsens. Now we suppress symptoms, but
so some people will take a pill, and then they'll say, I don't want to take it though because I don't like the way it makes me feel.
Yeah.
And then that adds insult to injury. So with you and what you do at Scenic City Neurotherapy is it's just that you're giving therapy to those neurons, right?
We're essentially stimulating those areas that broke down and disconnected to all plug back in. We're dealing with the underlying issue that causes you to feel depression or anxiety. We're not trying to mask depression and anxiety, because when we mask a symptom, weirdly enough, it gets stronger and stronger until it overwhelms our ability to mask it.
So here's how you can reach out to them, because the consultation initially is at no cost to you, and he's got to know what's going on in your respective life to then know what might be the right approach for you to achieve that healing. 228-0579. You can always go learn more at ScenicCityNeurotherapy.com. See what they do, hear some testimonials and the expertise behind them. Thanks, Charles.
Thank you.
Toyota gives you more hybrid choices than anyone else, like the best-selling RAV4. This summer, get a new 24 RAV4 or RAV4 hybrid with 4.75 APR financing, or lease one for $339 a month. The choice is yours. Toyota, let's go places.
Some people just know that the best rate for you is a rate based on you with Allstate. Because there's a right way to... Stop! And the speed limit definitely isn't...
700 million miles per hour.
So why would you pay a rate based on...
A terrible boss with a terrible haircut!
Save with DriveWise and get a rate based on you. Call or visit Allstate.com for a quote today. You're in good hands with Allstate.
The adrenaline was going, the accident just happened. That's when I called